Bump in the tech DI, the stage DI. Could you talk for a moment, please?
Um, the time has come, the walrus said, to talk of many things.
Excellent. And then, are you going to share any slides with us?
Nope.
Okay, so it's just we'll have your video up. If you look on the meeting room, you'll see a podium view and the audience
Wait, I
view.
lost you.
Could you still hear me?
Lost you.
You lost me. Did you, Marshall? Could you still hear me? Hey, Marshall.
Can't hear.
Hey, 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 hey.
Went away.
Yeah, what happened? 1 second. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, hey, something got disconnected at the podium. He just had me too. Hey, 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 hey. Just 1 second.
Can't hear anybody or.
Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. Two, two, two. Hey, 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 hey. Two, 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 two. Hey, Marshall, could you hear me? Hey, 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 hey. Two, two. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. Two, two, two. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 two. Two. Two, two, two. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, hey, check two. Are you getting me now, Marshall? Hey, hey.
Yeah.
You should be able to
Yes.
hear me now. Hey,
I
hey,
think.
hey.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfect. Could you hear us?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Now I'm staring at something odd. I don't have no idea what it is I'm staring at.
Could you see
Oh,
me
there
now?
you are. Yeah, 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 yeah,
All
yeah.
right, so you should see the two cameras. You're going to see an audience view and a podium view. You got it? All right, you got it? Hello? Hey, Marshall?
Yeah.
All right, just make sure you speak up when you present, and we'll put you on the screen in a moment.
Is David going to introduce?
Yes, yes, he'll introduce you, no problem. Anthony, let me get one on the switcher, please. Okay, great. All right, you can go back to the other one. Thank you. All right, Marshall, just hang tight. David's going to introduce you, and then we'll get started.
Okay.
Thank you. started. Mike's yours.
Hi, Marshall. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much again. We're going to start in like just a minute or so, okay?
Okay.
And I'll
All right.
introduce you and kind of cue up a little bit and remind you again what you're talking about.
Oh, very good. And I can't
Okay.
see, all I can see right now is the top of your head, or I can't see you.
Oh, can you see me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'll stand right here when I'm trying to be seen by you. Okay, cool.
And will I be able to see the audience?
Peter, can Marshall see the audience? Yeah, Marshall, you should have two cameras, one camera or one window that's looking at me and one that's looking at the audience.
I see the one at the audience, but it's tiny. I mean, I can't.
Yeah, I think that's the best we can do. I apologize. We're in the big room in the 6th floor of the Media Lab, so it's a pretty big room.
But I mean, the screen is. It gives me. It says, if I click on it, it says pin video, show non-video participants, and chat.
No, so don't click on the, don't click on full screen and don't pin video. The cameras will switch on their own to the people that are speaking, or you can, yeah. So if you go up to the right-hand side, you're going to see this thing that says gallery view, speaker view.
Right.
So
well,
you can
I see gallery view, and I'm on full screen view.
No. Get out of full screen. You don't want that, because you're not going to be able to see the other cameras like that. So get out of full screen and then toggle where it says gallery view, and you'll be able to see.
Gallery view?
Yeah, just talk. Now you should be able to see the differences.
Can I get rid of me?
No, it won't get rid of you. You won't see yourself, but we're still seeing you just fine.
Gigi, can you get people from outside to come in? Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, I have one blank square.
Yeah, there's a light that's shining straight into the audience camera, but don't worry. I mean, that's the best we can do. If anyone's going to ask a question, we'll ask them to step up to the camera.
Okay, that's cool.
All right, thank you, Marshall.
Okay, are we ready to go, Peter?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hey, could we get everybody to get in your seats, please? We're gonna start this next part promptly, so please have a seat. And if you could just quiet down your conversations, please, we're gonna get started. I'm sorry, Malta, you guys. Can you guys please just have a seat, please? Thank you.
Hey, Dave. We're gonna have Marshall first, Dave.
Yeah, Marshall's on right now.
All right,
yep,
got
let's
it.
put Marshall on screen.
All right, there he is.
Yeah, we get everybody inside to close the door, please. And please stop your conversations if you're having one right now, please. We'll just focus on the room. Thank you. Okay, everyone. All right, Marshall, we can see you. Awesome. Thank you so much. So, everybody, it's a real honor for me to introduce our next speaker. So, joining us in Washington, D.C. right now is Marshall Ganz. So, Marshall is really a legendary community organizer, has done work with Cesar Chavez, has developed the model that Obama adopted as part of his successful campaigns in 2008 and 2012. And really, you know, I've gotten to know Marshall recently. I've known his work for a while, and you know, we spoke recently, and I was telling him about all of you. I was telling him about grassroots biotechnology and this incredible movement. And you know, Marshall, you should be aware. You know, Joey had an opening talk yesterday, and Joey's talk title was "Are we a movement yet?" That was his question to us, and I think that's kind of been one of the major themes that we've been addressing together as a group. Is this question, you know, as a movement, you know, kind of do we feel that we are a movement? How far along are we? I think as we've been hanging out over the course of the past 24 hours, you know, I certainly feel like we are, and I think a lot of people in this room certainly do. But I think one of the reasons I was so excited to have you come join us was, again, given your experience working with many different types of movements, and again, particularly given your experience about public narrative and being able to communicate values, I think those are some incredibly important tools that this community is still maybe not has really been thinking about in terms of adopting and how we can kind of combine that into what we're doing. So really, really excited to have you here today to spend you know, just 10, 15 minutes with us and kind of give you an overview of kind of your toolkit and the tools that you've leveraged so successfully in other movements. And just so everybody here knows, tomorrow for the Unconference, one of Marshall's colleagues, Jeff, will be here to lead a session to go deeper into this. And Marshall normally leads, and this is what he's doing in DC right now, he normally leads like multi-day workshops to kind of really go deeply into this. And our goal tomorrow is to kind of identify some key folks, key movement leaders that may be interested in doing a more intensive session with Marshall and his team at some later point. So with that, Marshall, again, just such an honor to have you here. And so can we all welcome Marshall Ganz, please?
Thank you, David. Is this working? Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Good afternoon. I can't hear it back. Let me see. Good afternoon. All right, good. I got to have evidence of two-way communication so it's clear we're connecting. Yeah, thank you, David, for the opportunity to spend a few moments here with what we expect to be an important emerging movement that has a lot to contribute to shaping the future. My own approach to organizing and movement building and leadership really rests on a particular perspective on leadership and the critical role it plays in movement building. And it's rooted in three questions posed by a first century Jerusalem scholar, Rabbi Hillel, who, when asked, how do I figure out what to do in the world, responded with three questions to ask yourself. And the first question he says to ask yourself is, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? Now, that's not meant to be a selfish question, but it is meant to be a self-regarding question. Like, if you presume to enter the public life, you better be clear what's in it for you. What do you bring to it? What do you expect from it? What values are at stake for you? But then the second question he says to ask yourself is, if I am for myself alone, what am I? Because to be a who and not a what is to recognize that we exist in relationship with others in the world. Our capacity to realize our objectives is inextricably wrapped up with the capacity of others to realize theirs. And finally, he says, ask yourself, if not now, when? Not so much advice to jump into moving traffic, but recognition of the fact that rarely can you figure out how to do well what you want to do until you actually begin to do it. That understanding flows from action as opposed to preceding it. And I suspect this group is very clear about that reality. So for me, leadership is about the interaction of the self with others with action. And the fact that they are questions and not answers is also important, because if you think about what the domain of leadership is, rarely when things are going well do people say, where's the leadership so we can thank them? Much more often, people ask, where's the leadership when things are screwed up, when there's dilemmas, when there's problems, when there's new challenges and uncertainty. So it means coming to terms with the fact that the exercise of leadership is not about control. It's about the pursuit of purpose in the context of uncertainty and the unpredictable. And that's challenging, and it's challenging to the hands. Like, the question always arises, do I have the skills to deal with this new problem? It's challenging to the head. Can I use my resources in new ways to deal with these new challenges? A strategic challenge. And in some ways, most importantly, it's a challenge to the heart. How do I find the hope, the courage? How do I inspire the courage, the hope, the solidarity in others to take the risks involved in meeting new challenges? So it's sort of a head, hands, heart proposition. And often we think about leadership and movement building largely in strategic terms, when it's critically important for us to understand them in emotional terms as well, in terms of the heart as well as terms of the head. So while strategy is central, so is narrative, because narrative is a way in which we translate our values into the capacity for collective action, for responding to challenges as opposed to reacting to them. Just as strategy is a way we figure out how to use our resources proactively to respond to challenges as opposed to reacting to them. So there's a head and heart proposition that come together. So the definition of leadership that I've come to use is that it's about accepting responsibility for enabling others to achieve shared purpose. So this is not a diva idea of leadership. This is not the one sun that illuminates everybody. It's leadership as accepting responsibility to enable others to achieve shared purpose under conditions of uncertainty. So it's thinking of leadership much more in terms of a practice than it is a position. Because we all know about people occupying positions of formal leadership that turn out to be pretty awful leaders, and we sort of have examples of that every day in this country right now. And so we're not talking about position. We're not talking about even personality. We're talking about practice. And the practices that are central to the practice of leadership in the context of social movements turn out to be about 5. The first one is building relationships. It's relationship building, because the foundation for organization is relationship. It's not simply the aggregation of individual preferences. It's the connections people make with each other so that they can learn with each other, grow with each other, deepen understanding with each other, find common purpose with each other, develop the affective relationship that enables solidarity with each other. So relational work turns out to be foundational. Then there's the narrative work. How do we turn our values, how do we access the emotional capacity in our values for the hope, for the solidarity, for the sense of self-worth, to enable us to confront challenges, urgent challenges, with courage and strategically. So that's sort of the second. Then there's strategy. How do we turn what we have into what we need to get what we want? We're all natural strategists, just like we're natural storytellers, but this is learning how to do this stuff explicitly. It's sort of taking what we can do implicitly and learn to do it explicitly. So strategizing is a third dimension. Then structuring. So we know in narrative, we are able to articulate why we're doing what we're doing, why we care, and where we get our hope. In strategy, we're articulating how we're going to use our resources to get there. Structure is how do we organize ourselves to be able to do this so that we make the most of our commitments. It's how to make a whole that is greater than the sum of the parts, as opposed to a whole that is less than the sum of the parts, which happens when there's too much fragmentation. And finally, there's action. Okay, so now we've built this capacity. So now how do we turn this into action that changes the world? What are the facts on the ground? How are we actually changing things? In the world of organizing, we often do this in the form of campaigns. A kickoff, a series of peaks, each of which creates more capacity, and then aiming toward like a large peak, which is sort of a maximum moment of mobilization of resources in which we try to accomplish an objective. It's treating, Stephen Jay Gould talked about time as a cycle or time as an arrow. Time as a cycle as the rhythm of continuity, time as an arrow as the rhythm of change. So this is about time as the rhythm of change. And the other critical piece of organizing is that it's all about leadership development. It's not about one dot in the middle of everything, but it's also not about nobody, like we're all leaders, which winds up obscuring really where the decisions get made and how they get made and by whom. So it's stepping up and taking responsibility for developing the leadership and designing the structure that enables you to be agents, not reactors, to be able to respond and not react. Now, organizing in particular as a form of movement building focuses on the first question of being, who are my people? It's identifying a constituency, a community with whom I'm focused, identifying the challenges that community faces in terms of their lived experience. And most importantly, how do I work with this community to enable it to use its resources to turn them into the power that it needs to accomplish what it wants? So it's not about marketing products to customers. It's not about providing services to clients. It's about enabling people to come together, work together, decide together, act together, win together. That's what the word constituency means, coming from the Latin constare, which means to stand together. Now, it's easy for me to go through a series of there's 3 of this and 4 of that and 5 of that. Of course, the reality is the practice. And so in reality, the way to learn organizing it's the way to learn anything. It's the way you learn to ride a bike. I mean, I imagine everybody here learned to ride a bike, but I suspect you didn't get it by studying bicycleology. And I doubt you saw a great social media or a video. You have to get on the damn bike. And usually when you get on the bike, the first thing that happens is you fall. And that's your moment of truth when you figure out if you've got the courage to get back up on that bike, knowing you're going to keep falling for a while as the only way to keep your balance. I suspect this community understands that very, very well, given what you do. Well, it's just like that with organizing. It's a question of diving in, trying it, learning from the failures so that you become successful. And that's how it works. Now, we could go into that a lot more. I teach a whole semester class on it. I teach a distance learning class. We're having a 2.5-day session here in Washington right now with American Muslim leadership working on organizing as a community that faces enormous challenges right now. But you'll be hearing tomorrow from Jeff Rousset, who works with me, particularly on the heart part, on the narrative part, because that's often the part that gets left out. And it really is in many ways foundational, because it's how to appreciate the fact that within our values are embedded emotional resources that we need in order to act with courage, in order to act with solidarity, in order to act with the sense of hopefulness that it takes to actually change the world, not just wish that we were changing it. I think that about wraps up our time. I wish we had time for conversation. Do we have time for any questions, or are we done?
Marshall, if you have time, we have time.
Yeah, I got some time.
Let's take some questions. Anybody have questions for Marshall? This is a pretty amazing opportunity right now. So, and actually, I think, could somebody go to the info point and get the, or if somebody wants to volunteer to move mics around, that would be really helpful too. Oh, thank you so much. But we should get 1 or 2 to help. Thank you. Questions? I think Megan's got a question in the back. Yeah, Megan, if you're going to ask a question, come up to the camera up in the front here. Come to the front and grab a mic.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see you, Megan.
Yeah, so you can see Megan's hustling over. Marshall, and again, we're really, really grateful for this, and our hope is, again, to organize a session, a deeper session where we can go into a weekend and really spend some serious time with you on this. So, Megan, the camera is right over here. So, and this is Megan Palmer, a colleague on biosecurity from Stanford.
First, just thank you so much for sharing this. This is incredibly inspiring. And I was hoping you could just tell us maybe one little vignette of what either empowered you, who empowered you, or how did you first fail?
Oh boy, yeah, well, a lot of those. No, I was recruited. I grew up in Bakersfield, California. My father was a rabbi there, my mother a teacher, but I got involved in organizing through volunteering for the Mississippi Summer Project in 1964. And so my introduction to organizing was working with African-American organizers in Mississippi to challenge that whole regime. And it was a real, with all due respect to Harvard, where I had been an undergraduate prior to that for 3 years, it was really where my education about race, power, and politics in America began, because the inequalities were so evident. It was also evident that bringing a few medical supplies or books would not make much difference. And that's where I learned the difference between charity and justice, and that charity says, what's wrong? Let me help. Justice says, why is it happening? Let me change it. And when you begin asking those questions, you create a lot of discomfort, because what you discover is often that the people over here do not have enough because the people over here have too much. And so when you start trying to change that, you get resistance. And that's what led us to understand that we had to learn about power. And that power is how you turn your resources into the capacity to get what you need. And we thought that, a lot of people thought, power came from the top down. But what the civil rights movement taught us was that it could come from the bottom up. And in particular, the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama, that began the modern civil rights movement, was an illustration of how people could use a common resource, namely their feet. If they use their feet instead of getting on the bus and giving the bus company their bus fare, and if they all use their feet to walk to work instead, they could turn their dependence on the bus company into the bus company's dependence on them. And that shift, the sort of recognition that ordinary people could create the power they needed to create change, that was very exciting. That got me engaged in this whole idea that you could work with leadership to build community, to build power, which I then continued with the farm workers in California for 16 years as we took on the agriculture industry there. And then another 10 years of union issue and electoral work. And along the way, there have been plenty of failures. I mean, campaigns that we initiated that peaked after the election, or boycotts we undertook that we didn't know when to cut our losses. And so what I found was that being part of a community of struggle where we could support one another and learn with one another was crucial to turning those losses into learning opportunities. I mean, it created the scaffolding to be able to step back and say, no, this is not the end of the world. What do we learn from this? And from that, then learn how to go forward. I mean, that's a bit of a generic response, but I guess the last thing I'll say is I had wonderful mentoring in the South from SNCC organizers who'd been at it, in the farm workers with Cesar Chavez and Fred Ross. They taught us organizing as a craft, not just like, hey, you go out there and just, be one with the people. It wasn't like that. There were skills, there's a craft. It takes real intentionality. And I think I was blessed with those opportunities in learning how to do this work.
We've got one more question over here.
If it's time.
I'm sorry?
Do we have time? One more.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Hi, Marshall, can you see me? Am
Yeah,
I on
hi.
the, okay, hi, my name's Heather Underwood from Denver Biolabs, and thank you
Hi, Heather.
so much. This has been an incredible talk. Yes, sorry, I'm looking up at you up there.
No.
So my question, and you actually just touched on it a little bit, was about this idea of leadership transfer. So because leadership is a craft and an art and something that you can really cultivate in someone, and I'm interested if you have advice or thoughts on how to successfully take those skills and transfer them to new leadership in the same organization. So still making space for the individual to be their own leader while maintaining some core values of the organization. So I'd love to hear about that.
No, it's
Thank
a
you.
great question. And I wish I had the Hoberman sphere here to demonstrate how this works. But, we traditionally think of leadership as like a person, a dot in the middle of a whole bunch of arrows pointing to that person. And it's highly problematic both for the person and for everybody else. The person burns out, everybody else burns out. And it's fundamentally problematic. So sometimes we react to that so much that we go to the opposite extreme and sort of say, okay, we're not going to have any of that. Joe Freeman, a feminist sociologist, wrote a piece in 1972 called The Tyranny of Structurelessness, where she argued that anytime people get together, they're going to form a structure. Now, it's either going to be visible on the books, accountable and transparent, or it's going to be off the books. It's going to be personalistic. It's going to be factionized and opaque, and nobody will know where decisions are being made or by who, but they'll be happening anyway. And that's highly problematic. What we've been working on is developing collaborative leadership team as the most effective way to get the benefit of both worlds. We began learning how to do that in the Sierra Club project we did a number of years ago, and then introduced it in the Camp Obamas as the foundational leadership structure for the Obama campaign at the volunteer base. So it wasn't like one person who was, like the sun, whatever, but it was also not, it was a deliberately constructed team that was bounded, stable, had a clear shared purpose, clear governing rules, how they were going to decide things, clear roles, Also a name and a chant, which is another just little extra feature that you might want to add to it. But the point is, it's a real team that's constructed to lead, in which each person has leadership responsibilities. Someone's responsible for coordinating the team, but somebody else is responsible for leadership, say, on strategy, and somebody else responsible for leadership on something else. And then each of them forms their own team. And so then they become leaders of a second tier of leadership, and then a third tier of leadership. And so some people call that a snowflake. But in other words, it's a way of understanding that leadership is to be cultivated, developed, and diffused throughout a movement. It's not just one thing. And what that does is then, you know, when people move on and have to go to other places, people are being developed all the time. See, it's this idea that how we organize our work has everything to do with whether we're developing leadership or not. It's not like you can organize things in a narrowly hierarchical, you know, command and control way, and then send a bunch of people off to leadership school and they're going to come back and be leaders. It's the day-to-day practice that develops leadership or not. Are people learning to build relationships? Are people learning to strategize? Do they hold responsibility? Are they developing the capacity to motivate others? And it's building that in and the scaffolding, the coaching to it, that then makes a leadership-rich organization as opposed to a leadership-poor one. And I know that sounds sort of, you know, like broad, but that's very much how we built the volunteer organization, the Obama campaign, very much how we work with the Dreamers to develop their capacity during the Dreamers campaign. So this is a way to approach things that, as I say, emphasizes the development of leadership. I hope that's helpful.
Marshall, that's amazing. I'm wondering if you have time for maybe 2 more questions. Are you out?
I'm still good.
You're still
I hope
good?
my computer. Yeah.
Oh, no.
I'm at 3% on my laptop. No.
Marshall, find your power now. Somebody, we're at MIT. Let's send them some. Let's. Oh my God, Marshall. Oh my God. Oh my God. I wish we could help. Oh my God, what a moment. As Marshall's about to dispense the advice that's about to propel our movement.
We're almost there. Yay!
Yes!
This is how stories are created.
So, tēnā koutou rangatira. I'm Alison Stringer from New Zealand. Can you hear me okay?
I can. How are you?
I'm very good. So I organised my first protest when I was 18 for Amnesty International, actually. So I'm a kind of a burnt-out organizer a little bit. So I think you partially answered the question with the previous question of how to sustain through, I guess, burnout and how to sustain an organisation through tough times. Just wondering if there's anything else you might like to add from your previous marks, the previous question. Kia ora, thank you very much.
No, I think we actually do a whole module on stories of loss, on how to turn the experiences of loss into redemptive ones rather than contaminating ones. And there's actually a psychologist at Northwestern that's done a lot of work on this, Dan McAdams. And it's not about denial of the pain of loss, it's recognizing, embracing it, but finding pathways to agency through it. You know, there's a great example of this is Robert Kennedy, the day Martin Luther King was assassinated, was sent to give a talk to the African-American community in Indianapolis. And it's a brilliant example of acknowledging the loss, the pain, and yet finding a pathway to action through it. And I'd urge you to see it. It's on video and so forth. You can take a look. It's extraordinary. But it isn't just loss. It's also, you know, tiredness and burnout and all the rest of it. It's one reason why constructing things in campaigns is very important, because campaigns have beginnings, they have ends. And you end, you won, you lost. And then you learn, and then you move on. It is not like you can't sustain energy at a high level, just unlimitedly. It's taking advantage of the fact there are thresholds, and each threshold offers opportunities for learning. When our pedagogy, when we're teaching this stuff, is to explain conceptually what the practice is, to then model it, to then practice it, and then debrief the practice, so that we build in debriefing in everything. It's like after every meeting, after every action, there's what are the pluses, what worked, what are the deltas, what do we need to improve, what are the takeaways. So that it isn't extraordinary to try to learn from our practice. We just build it in to, that's just part of the practice, is learning. That helps enormously, because there's a constant opportunity then for adaptation, sort of more like in the agile approach to things than the waterfall approach to things, familiar with that. But at the core, it has to really matter. And, there are values at stake, and the values are what sustain us, and our capacity to support one another in those values, to find those sources of hope. And that stuff really matters. And sometimes if we ignore that, then we really just run out of steam. Organizations know that they have meetings. Organizations know that they act. But organizations also need to realize that they have to celebrate. And by celebration, I just don't mean having a beer party. I mean, that's fine. But I mean honoring the values that are moving them to do what they're doing. And that kind of celebratory, that's important. And that's where storytelling comes in, and a lot of other elements come in. So we feed the heart along with the head and the hands. I think that's a critical piece. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Marshall. Yeah, wonderful answer. So I'm just going to ask one more concluding question, because we've already taken so much of your time. And this is a practical question, just given where we are in the process of this meeting. So, we have one more day today, and then we have a final day tomorrow. Tomorrow is our final day, which is basically all unstructured on-conference. And, we have a lot of great opportunities where people are going to be discussing all kinds of different topics and groups. So it's a two-part question, but connected. So the first part is, for this particular event and the time that we have left, one of the big questions we've been thinking about, again, kind of spurred on by Joey yesterday, is, how do we constructively build from these 2 days, right? We have all been a part of these meetings where you go to a thing, you have a great time, you meet some people, but then it just kind of dissipates, right? So we have an opportunity now to kind of leverage this time in front of us to make sure that we have something to build on. So that's the first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, this particular community is a global community. I think one of the really exciting parts for me about what has happened to this event is, we literally have folks here from every continent, and we all have different cultures and different experiences, but I think what brings us together is this idea that, biotechnology is too important to be left to just kind of the few, and that the many need to be involved, and we all need to be engaged. And so kind of how do we take these 2 days to build something that this whole global community can work on afterwards?
Oh, that's an easy question.
Close on an easy one, yeah.
No, look, I think you have an extraordinary opportunity. I really, for so many reasons. Walter Brueggemann, the Protestant theologian, wrote a book called The Prophetic Imagination, and he says that transformational vision occurs at the intersection of two elements. One is criticality, which is a clear view of the world's need, of its hurt, of its pain, coupled with hope, a sense of its promise and its possibilities. And young people come of age with a critical eye on the world they find, as probably most folks in this room, but almost of necessity hopeful hearts. And that combination of energy can be powerfully transformational, but it needs to be structured. And I think that one of the challenges that you probably face is that. How will you coordinate? Will you have a leadership team? Will you have multiple leadership teams? Because when we set up a structure, we look at how we're going to govern ourselves. What's our shared purpose? We actually did a session on this for the Resistance School that the Kennedy School students organized last spring. There's an online resource for how to launch a leadership team that includes how to come up with your name and your chant as well, by the way. No, I think grappling with this question of structure in a non-ideological way, but treating it from a practical perspective is very important. I think work on story will be Jeff's going to introduce you to that. The sharing of stories is important because it's how we actually experience the values we share. It's not like a mission statement where it says, we all believe X, Y, Z, and then nobody pays attention to it. It's through stories, because their capacity to communicate emotional content. Values are emotional in content. And so stories are what allow us to communicate values we share, honor them, and draw strength from them. That's very important as well. And come up with ways you're going to check in with each other. I think the internet can be such a powerful aid. I teach a distance learning class in the spring, but it's with about 130 people in about 20 countries. And we use WebEx as a platform because everybody can see each other. So we can have real-time engagement, building the relational foundation of what we're doing, building a community of learning, not by being just data points to one another, but by being human beings to one another that can learn with each other. And I think that capacity has barely begun to be tapped. I think it has huge potential. Seeing makes such a difference because we are, all the nonverbal communication, it allows that kind of communication to occur so we can actually be in relationship with one another and take advantage of all the wonderful diversity. I mean, that is so enriching and such a great opportunity for learning. But it requires that we have common structure, enough of a common structure and narrative that we can turn those sources of diversity into resources and not obstacles. I think you're in a great position to do that. And I really look forward to learning from your work and how this all unfolds in the future. And again, thank you, David, and thanks to everyone for the opportunity to begin this conversation. Thank you.
Marshall, we love you. Thank you so much for that. And we'll check in with Jeff. And then, the game plan, I think, still is to try to work more deeply with you in some follow-up events. So we'll stay in touch and we'll talk about that afterwards.
Okay.
So
Thanks
one
a
more
lot.
time for
Good
Marshall,
night,
everybody. Thank you so much again, Marshall.
Bye.
Woo! Wow. So that happened. I'm kind of speechless. I knew that Marshall was going to be really great, but I didn't really kind of appreciate kind of what just happened there. So I don't know. We have another session that's coming up now, and I want to start that. But before I start that, I feel like we just experienced something together, and I don't know. Maybe I don't know if anybody wants to share or say something or express anything right now before we kind of move on. What's that? Try not to cry. That's good. Try not to cry is good. I'm kind of in that space too. I don't know if anybody else has any. Yeah, Megan. I don't know if there's a microphone for Megan. Thank you. Can somebody else volunteer to help pass around mics right now, please? Thank you.
I'm probably gonna cry. No, I just wanted to, this is a really special moment, so thank you for doing that, David, and thank you for just standing up and being a leader in this community. It's really inspiring to see, especially the celebration of diversity that's happening here. So thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to helping to create that structure along with all of you. So thank you.
Anyone else? I'm just opening it up just in case anybody wants to share anything. Yeah, Natalie. Oh, there's a microphone coming.
Thanks. So I will echo Megan's thanks for that wonderful opportunity. The piece that has me thinking is this opportunity we have now to move from passion or rage about a situation to actual agency. And I think that that was the challenge that he sort of offered and has us, is what lays ahead. So I think it's really very crystal clear, you know, the excitement or passion or anger or whatever is the initial motivator can bring us together, but to move forward, what that agency looks like is, I think, the next very exciting step. So thank you.
Anyone else?
Right here. So again, to echo what you said, thank you, and thank you, David. We really, really do appreciate the opportunity to all come together and really make this movement work. Some resources out there. I mean, I'm from BioCurious. We're hosting sessions. I'm hosting one in Asia. If you guys are from Asia or Pacific, we're going to have an on-conference to sort of meet up and talk about things. Maria Chavez is also doing Latin America and South America to sort of coalesce around some ideas of how we can work together with you guys. So those are two groups. But I also want to remind you guys that have spaces. The Nation of Makers, started by the Obama administration, is really reaching out to us, and we need to reach out to them as well to create resources around the maker movement and our spaces. So there will be a conference later this year that they're working on and really helping us build this movement as a larger whole in the maker movement. So I would appreciate if you guys could, if you haven't joined, join. You know, let's not have to reinvent the wheel. Okay, use these resources that they're providing for us, getting insurance and just basically working out paperwork. So, and you know, thank you all for being here and sort of taking the time out of your schedule to really make these ideas come to fruition and help everyone.
Thanks.
I just want to echo, thank you so much for that moment. That was very, very impactful. And thank you also to all you guys. I mean, it's been so inspiring getting to meet you guys, and I'm just honored to be here with you guys, you all. It seems to me like we're still operating a bit under the radar of public knowledge a little bit. Like we're kind of in this golden time where we are free to do what we like. But I think the nature of our work is probably potentially quite scary and elicits a lot of emotion and fear for the broader public. So one of the things I took away from that talk was the power of emotion and positive storytelling. And so this might be a great opportunity for us to work together to kind of to talk about that story and that narrative, and I'm really excited about this the thing tomorrow. Yeah, let's do that.
Awesome. And maybe time for one other comment. Maybe somebody from non-U.S., maybe somebody from non-U.S., non-Europe. If anybody has a comment. Okay. So just to say, you know, again, Jeff is going to be with us tomorrow. So Marshall and I, we're trying to figure out like what's the best way to leverage him and his team's skills for this this particular meeting. And what we were realizing was like you can only squeeze in so much. And actually, I think we kind of accomplished what the goal was that we had talked about, which was like let's get the community to appreciate and understand this toolkit, and that there are ways to try to more kind of systematically strategize. And so I think the goal, you know, following Jeff's session tomorrow, which I think is going to be at 12:30 or 1, we're going to try to organize a follow-up event with Marshall and his team and with a few of you all, and we'll try to do like a whole weekend, because they normally do this, you know, very, very intensive thing, like, you know, every single day for several days. And so that will be our goal, one of the goals following this meeting. So, so yeah, we'll try to figure out a structure a little bit tomorrow, and then after this to make that happen. So, so yeah, so just thank you all for being here and for being present for that. I felt like that was, you know, we've been talking about Change the World and is this an epic historic meeting, but I felt like that was something really special that we all shared together. So thank you all for being present and for your energy and spirit for that. So thank you all. Whew, okay, all right, so I know we had a schedule, I don't even know what the schedule is. It was like on a piece of paper, then it was on my computer. Oh yeah, thank you, Scott. Okay, so I do want to be respectful of everybody that had been preparing so hard for all of these different moments that we have. And one of the nice things is because tonight we just have the party, you know, we're kind of here. We have the space until like 10 o'clock. So if you guys are okay with it, we'll just continue with the program. If we go late, we go late, right? And so I'm just going to go into the next session because the next session does connect really well actually with what a lot of Marshall was discussing. And so the next session is on economy, ecology, and environment. So it is really thinking about global issues and thinking about how biotechnology connects with a lot of people from around the world that are really thinking seriously about the environment and conservation and so on. And so I can't think of a better person to come on stage and be a part of this than Adeline. Everybody, round of applause for Adeline. Yes, Adeline's so amazing. So Adeline and I, we met in Singapore. Adeline is so cool and so great, and it's really holding it down for Southeast Asia. You know, when we were organizing this event, we really wanted to make sure people from Southeast Asia, because I didn't realize that there was so much activity there, and Adeline was the one who was like, all right, this person from, you know, Myanmar, this person from Cambodia, this person from here. So she kept emailing me people and be like, oh my God, I'm really sorry, but yeah, here's this person. So, and you know, again, we took everybody that we could. Next year with more planning to deal with visa BS, we'll get more people here. But anyways, Adeline, the floor is yours, and yeah.
Hi. Yeah, there's not as much going on in Southeast Asia as I would like, but I was trying to get a lot of people out here, and so yeah, they're floating around in here somewhere. Anyway, so yeah, I'm really excited to be hosting this session, even though I only just met all the speakers and I don't know them personally. So I'm going to have to read from my notes to introduce the first speaker, who is Beno Juarez. He grew up in the jungles of Peru. I'm very jealous about that. He also founded the first Fab Lab of South America, and he's now the director of the Latin America Fab Lab Network, and he's going to talk to us today about the floating Fab Lab Amazon. So here he is.
Thank you so much. I think we have to switch the presentation. Yeah, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here to share what are we doing in the jungle. Well, I grew up in the Peruvian jungle, in the Amazon rainforest, and for most of the kids of my generation, the future could mean become a farmer, become a mother, or maybe a military, or maybe a terrorist. No? Some friends of my schools become terrorists, no? And I was really lucky because, well, my family moved from this situation. Well, I didn't fall this way, no? But today we have no terrorists, but the social exclusion still is present in the Amazon rainforest. No? After, well, I follow out of the Amazon in this very critical situation, I went to Lima, to the capital, and I falling in love to this new kind of jungle, no? The city that started to grow very chaotic and spontaneously, etc. And that's the reason why I decided to study architecture. And with some friends, we started to imagine what can we use from this emergent city or emerging artificial jungle to create a sustainable city. So we realized that we have many power that we release in our activities, and especially in the hotels. No? When we review Lima, no? When we search Lima, the highest buildings was the hotels. So if we add to this situation that inside the hotel we have activities that spend a lot of power, we imagine, no? To put inside the beds the microturbines that could create power with all these activities inside the hotels. No? Imagine the hotel that all the facade lighting with this power of love. No? So we started to create these kind of devices more than 10 years ago, but we have not the technologies and the tools to make it real. So at the end, it was extremely frustrated, no? Because we have many ideas, many projects that we wanted to do, but we have not the possibilities and the way to make it. So in 2009, I was really lucky to be selected by this network, the Fab Lab network, founded by Nir Gershenfeld, too close to here, no? In the CVA. It's, well, as you know, no? It's an amazing opportunity to bring people the capability to make whatever you want and create community around this kind of technologies, etc. So I started in 2009 when we was not more than 30 Fab Labs around the world. We are more than 1,000 today and growing exponentially year by year. And in this space, I learned, for me, the most important concept of what a Fab Lab is. It's a place where you can make your ideas real. No? So in less than 2 weeks, I made this prototype to generate power with your movement and lighting, whatever you want, and power your cell phones, etc. And also I was part of different projects as a Fab Lab house that generate power with solar panels, etc. And after that, in 2010, we come back to Peru. We found, with the participation of Neil Gershenfeld and many people around the world, the first Fab Lab in South America. And after that, we started to make a community. A big job making these relationships. Especially, I think one of the keys to make this community is give the power to people to make their own dreams real and give the opportunities and open the community as a way to scale their impacts in global sense. No? So in my case, my passion is Amazon, and after come back to Peru, I started to imagine how can we connect all these opportunities with local people in the Amazon rainforest. As you know, it is our biggest biolab. Have you ever been in the Amazon? Maybe somebody here? Yeah, 1, 2. Wow, I really appreciate. I will invite you, everybody, all here to go, please. Let's go together to the Amazon rainforest. Maybe the next Global Community Bio Summit could be in the Amazon. You will love. Everything is alive. You can eat everything, and everything can eat you also. So it's amazing. No? If you are passionate by nature, you have to be there. No? Of course, George Charles was there. No? He said me, yes, I know these places, etc. I was really surprised with that. But we are losing the Amazon, no? Especially by the global warming and the contamination and the depredation, etc. But to me, the most dangerous, it's not open opportunities for local people. No? It's not about to be the voice that people that have not. It's to open opportunities for they develop their own voice. No? This is our motivation of this project. So we are developing these floating structures, these biolabs and fab labs that we navigate the Amazon River and tributaries, connecting local communities with global communities as you, no? To have all this infrastructure to make whatever we want and to generate solutions for their own problems, but also for global challenge. No? So we are a big team, more than 50 people involved working here, as Pierre that is also here, no? And researching in many different fields. For example, learning about the walking tree. Do you know there is a tree that can walk? No? This is a palm that can move more than 6 or 7 meters in 10 years. And we are learning about that and about these sensors that it have, biosensors, in order to create solutions, for example, for housing. This is how people live in the jungle. And every year they have to move over the pilot because the level of the river. We are researching about how to create flexible pilots that could adapt it to the river level. No? And also looking for solutions for the pollinators. No? We are losing pollinators in the world. And through this kind of smart beehives developed by Fab Lab Barcelona, we are adapting this to local communities. They are from Huitoto community. She is Maria. She is the president of the community. And she's very happy with this project because they are growing their own pollinators and developing different products. One of the products that we are developing is this 3D printer for where we use the beewax to make artificial arterials. It was part of the How to Grow 2015, where I have the amazing also opportunity to meet people like David, like George Charles. You know, it's a super experience that we are connecting also with jungle people to develop technologies to use their own materials. No? Also, another big challenge in the jungle is water contamination. No? In this sense, for example, when I was a kid, I could drink directly the water from the rivers without any problem. But today, most of the kids are in risk to be, they don't know what kind of contaminators they have. We are developing with Keita Damala also, professor in the How to Grow, and Hilario Laman, etc., this kind of bracelet that will give to the kids the possibility to detect what kind of contaminators there are and upload to the cloud and report like a Science for Citizens project. No? And also in this way, we are developing different biorobots that could detect with using also biosensors. It was also developed in the How to Grow program, different contaminators, and especially creating like a toy. Everything is involved in how to make it funny, how to make it accessible for the communities, and easy to use. Finally, I wanted to share, one very good news. 3 months ago, I was talking with a farmer. He was a farmer for coca for cocaine, and he said me, today I have replaced all my my coca's growth by cacao because it's more rentable. Sorry, my English. Profitable than the coca today, no? Wow, it was amazing. It's a first time in the history when a farmer have more opportunities growing cacao than coca. So if you like chocolate, you are in the right addiction. But it's also a big challenge because it's a monoculture, no? And the monoculture could also predate the jungle. No more than 20% of the jungle have been predated because these monocultures. And also, paradoxically, in these high biodiversity areas, we have more than 70% of malnutrition in kids. No? So how can we create solutions? Well, last year we started to develop these 3D printers for nutrients that will grow and make all the vitamins that you need in your house according to your personal situation. One adaptation of this project, it's this tree. This is like an artificial tree that will allow you to produce any fruit anywhere with your customized nutrition, and especially focused to bring these nutrients for kids, and also an opportunity for farmers, as my father. He's my father that for many years, as more than 90% of farmers in the world, he was selling their products as a raw material, but through this machine, they will convert in like cartouches, like the Café Espresso, and distribute through, for example, the Fab Lab network, all these cartouches to the world, no? With many other advantages. So if you are involved in nutrition or in agro, it will be great to work together also in this sense. And also in education, we are working a lot in education and many different opportunities for people. Well, to finish, I would like to share this image. No? This is the Amazon River where the Amazon starts and the Amazon River ends. And all this trip to me and to make this community and project was to believe in, doesn't matter all the resources that you have today. If you really believe, you will make the way to make it real. Like the Amazon River, no? When it started, where it started is like a small pieces of water, but it followed the direction, and in the way it's finding the groups of people and all the collaboration to make this amazing, like a sea inside the continent. Thank you so much. To end, this is the cacao, one of the cacaos from these farmers, and I would like to do, of course, to David, as a thank you for all these amazing events. Thank you, David. Yeah. This is 100% chocolate, no? Thank you so much.
Thanks for that talk. I am totally going to visit you next year. I'm taking you on that. I guess I need to introduce myself. So I am a geneticist, but then I decided that I wanted to go and work in wildlife conservation. So I'm back to Southeast Asia and have been exploring conservation, in many different countries. I also just finished running the second Singapore Eco Film Festival, and that was pretty exhausting. And then I packed up my life there to move to the US and starting in New York. So I promise you I'm more coherent off stage than on stage. So if none of this makes any sense, because it's 2 a.m. in Singapore, like, please come and find me later on. And I also run a nonprofit to do what I call creative awareness and, more like what I think is needed for conservation. So wait, I'm going to set a timer because otherwise I'm going to totally go off track here. Is this it? Okay. All right, so this is the situation in Southeast Asia. It's exactly what it looks like. No, okay, this is not what it looks like, but it looks like this in many parts when they're burning. And many of these issues are, of course, like not unique to Southeast Asia, but we have the happy couple of corruption and poor enforcement in Southeast Asia, outside Singapore, of course. And there's a lot of biodiversity loss. So in Southeast Asia, like, we are a biodiversity hotspot, and also like we have a lot of endemism, which means that there are many species that are only found in certain regions that are found nowhere else in the world. So, and then the other problem, of course, is that we're also very dense with humans, and so this combination, of course, leads to things like, we're killing animals for ivory because people want to have pretty things to look at. we have the world's most trafficked mammal. These are pangolins. If you've ever heard me talk, like, I always talk about pangolins at some point. Many of you who are at the SimBio conference, like, a lot of this is probably quite familiar, so you might want to take a nap or go get coffee or something. And so, this animal is being traded for luxury consumption and as traditional Chinese medicine. Whether or not that's effective is, different question. And then now, forget sharks. Now that we're running out of sharks, the things that people are touting are manta ray gills. And so the gills are being sold as part of traditional medicine as well. There are no regulations. There are probably some regulations, but in Asia and with illegal wildlife trade, regulations don't really mean anything. And then we have this, which is really sad. So does anybody know what these are? Turtles, yeah. Does anyone know which species of turtle this is? Nene, do you know? What is it? This is the Philippines forest tortoise. Yeah. So this confiscation was, I think, 2 years ago, and this species, which is endemic to the Philippines, was thought to have. Scientists had estimated that there were 2,500 individuals in the wild. Like, that was the entire population. This one confiscation that was heading off to China had 4,000 individuals in here. So either this one confiscation would have wiped out the entire population, or scientists have massively underestimated what the wild population is. And this is happening all the time. We just don't really hear about it in the news. So it's really depressing. I think that there are a lot of things going on. And if you are like me, who always follows wildlife trafficking in the news, it's really depressing. But let's bring it back with perspective, right? So I think food is something, and these are, I think, with many community labs, which is food is a great way to bring people together. Does anybody know what this is? Who's been in Asia or probably in some Chinese restaurant here? Yes, that's right. Fish balls. I love eating this growing up. And fish balls, you would think, are made of fish. But now that with shark's fin, what they do is they take the fin off and they used to throw away the meat, but now they're using the meat in our products. So a lot of fish balls, I heard from a shark campaigner, is that they're using shark meat. And I was like, what? I thought I was relatively, up to date with what's going on with wildlife food. And how sad. This is a very nice photograph. Sharks belong in the ocean, okay? So I was horrified. I only learned that a few weeks ago at the Eco Film Festival, because we showed a shark film and we had someone come on as a speaker. So basically, but this is not just in Southeast Asia, but many parts of the world, we don't know what we're eating. So we have, my favorite, I'm sorry, I like to list China, but it's mainly because China is one of the biggest, food producers, and also, the export, import, and they have poorly enforced regulations. So, these have been in the news recently. And so, I do genetics. So, of course, DNA barcoding to the rescue. So you can do a lot of things with DNA barcoding, with kind of monitoring our food supply, looking at species for wildlife trafficking, you can do that. And so this is where open science comes in for me. So I was really excited, to find all these open source tools that are cheaper, that are portable, that people can learn how to fix. You have, Bento Lab is just one example. We have David here, who's with Conservation X Labs, and he'll be joining me tomorrow in the unconference to talk about the DNA barcode scanner that he's been working on. And then also, I'll be joining the zoo and using, this is more high tech. And obviously not open source, which is the Nanopore DNA sequencer. But I can't wait until someone makes the first open source DNA sequencer that I can use. And so not just we don't know what we're eating, we also don't know how food is produced or where it's coming from. And so I was actually looking around for a news article on food scandal with dumplings from China, because I figured you can put anything into dumplings and nobody really knows. So I couldn't find that, but instead I found this. What do Chinese dumplings have to do with global warming? And so, and this one is really interesting because it talks about how refrigeration has changed the way we move food around the world, and also it's also changed the way that we preserve our food. So now that with refrigeration, a lot of Chinese, in the Chinese culture, they're not fermenting, they're not salting, they're not preserving a lot of their food in the older ways. But also refrigeration, I think it's 1/6 of our energy use or something like that. And so, here again, I think open science has a has a potential to like provide a solution. Like we need cleaner, cheaper, like more local ways of refrigerating our food. But not just with food, wildlife health actually really matters because we have, diseases that pass naturally from animals to humans. And so this is just a random list that I found of, apparently really important zoonoses that we should be all worried about. But I think the point here is that, when we think about wildlife, it's not just about not eating them or like they're really cute, but they also affect our health as well. And so this was the example I found. The reason why I pulled this one out was because I was just in Myanmar earlier this year, and I went to Yangon, Inle Lake, and Mandalay, and I've been in Bagan before. And so, this innocent tourist went off on her holiday, and then picked up, a disease from drinking milk. And her partner didn't get it just because he didn't drink it. And so, it's not just about wildlife, it's about, we go out and we think that we're not interacting with animals in any way, but we are because we eat. And then this one also is, our impact on wildlife, which is antibiotic resistance. I think there are a lot of citizen science kind of projects looking at antibiotic resistance. And this is like one of the documented cases of antibiotic resistance seen in wildlife. This is an endangered population in Sydney, although little penguins are found in other parts of the world as well. And so I guess the point of this is that we need to look at our relationship with animals in more than just we eat them and we use them way. And so maybe you think I just want to eat my sharks and my seafood, and I don't really care if they die out anyway, but then, there are other things like, if you want to eat these things, there are a lot of environmental toxins. So we have mercury in apex predators like shark, tuna, things pregnant women don't eat aren't supposed to eat too much of certain fish. We have plastics in our oceans, and so that means that there are a lot of things leaching into your seafood as well, because a lot of these marine animals, and not just food, a lot of these marine animals are eating plastics, indirectly or directly. And so, the question is that we really are not very connected to our bodies and our food anymore. And I think open science is going to give us the tools to do that. The chief stat is something that I've been talking about for like years, and I still haven't been able to sit down with anyone to help me do this. And this is an open source potential stat to detect like heavy metals. It can also detect DNA, but heavy metals first for me. And then we also have Mary's, we have Mary's estrogen like biosensors. And so I think like it's important that we have these cheap, easy to transport tools that are easy for people to use and learn about what's relevant to them, right? And so I think for me, this is this kind of story I want to tell, which is that like open science can do a lot of things. It's important that we have traceability of wildlife products, of our food supply. It's looking at human health, wildlife health, basically clean up the environment. I didn't really get to any of those technologies. But then let's talk about conservation again. So in the past, conservation has been terrible at working with local communities. We kicked people out of where they lived, and we said nobody should live in national parks because this should be pristine. But then what has often happened is that then we open up these national parks for tourism, or we also, like in Asia, we like to give them away to companies to develop inside there. But this attitude has been changing the last 30 years, which is great, but like it needs to change faster. And I think for me, when I first met Hectare Lab and Mary and all the other cool people who I met in Yogyakarta, the first thing that I saw was that many DIY biohacking groups are about working with local communities. And for me, in Southeast Asia, like we were in Indonesia. That's Andy, who's oh my gosh. Okay, that's Andy, who's with NUS in Singapore, and he went off to the Philippines to build a floating lab there. I also think that it's important that the way we teach people and like want to share with people about science and about wildlife is to use art. This is one of my favorite artists ever. He's based in Australia. And then we also have communities that are building their own tools. So this one, and these tools are not just about investigating the health of the environment, but also like land rights. In Indonesia, there's a lot of land that just gets given away or just taken by other people. And so communities are building their own. This is kind of politically sensitive, I guess, because now they can map, like, oh, this traditionally was my area, and who's coming into here. In Singapore, I think the way we talk about it is like, we have workshops. We did this like biosynth with the Life Patch guys. And then also, there's always an opportunity for me to talk about wildlife. So, I saw these beautiful PCBs. I don't really know how to make them. I learned how to solder. That was very exciting. But I see an opportunity, like you can get people to come and learn about synthesizers, about whatever it is you want, electronics that has nothing to do with wildlife. And still, I could talk about, I could talk about crocodiles. And so the other thing I do is I love to go off to these rural communities. And so I was in Myanmar, and I think working in local communities is really important because, these are the people who are living in the areas that I want to protect. And you cannot get conservation without having, these people who live there take part in what you want to achieve. And so at the end of the day, and I think Benno probably, it's about education. If you ask a lot of these people who are poaching or who are deforesting, who are cutting down the forest, whatever it is that they're doing, a lot of them do it for their kids, and they want education for their kids. I think that's one. They also want good healthcare. And I think these are things that open science can give to them. I also think that this is an opportunity for providing role models for people in areas where they seldom, at least for Southeast Asia, women don't often take an active role in leading. The team, I was out in Myanmar earlier this year because of a turtle film. And, I was with a group. Gogo is, where is Gogo? Gogo's on the left with the big glasses. She's a Turkish PhD student. In the middle of Kalia, who's the team leader for the turtle group. She's fantastic. And then we have Jenny, who was from the US, who was the director. And so basically, I see a lot of overlap in what's needed for conservation and what is probably going to happen and what's needed for open science. And a lot of it, I think, is about building community and learning how to keep that community together. And and it's about having fun. And I think I've had such a wonderful time here. David, thank you for having me here. I also really liked what Marshall said. Our Eco Film Festival was not just about teaching people, but about celebrating the successes, because it can be extremely depressing about wanting to achieve something. And so I think that was really great to hear him share all his experiences too. So that's it. Come and find me later. All right. And then I get to come back again to introduce the next speaker. I think that's Reese. Is that right? Is Reese somewhere? Oh, okay. So Reese is the communications director of BioTown, which is Ottawa's biohackerspace. He's going to talk about a citizen science project that can be a rallying cry for lots of biohackers around the world. So here he is.
Thanks. Okay. How's it going, everyone? I shouldn't be too long. I'm going to try to make up a little bit of time. My name is Reese. I am with BioTown out of Ottawa. And I'm going to change what I was going to say a little bit in light of what Marshall was talking about and the importance specifically of narrative and strategy. So BioTown is a little bit over a year old, and we're still trying to make our name in Ottawa, attract groups, attract members who are really trying to be a member-focused biohacker space. And a lot of the time, we run into the problem of explaining what we are, what DIY Bio is, and what our goals are. And the first question we'll get is, what can your lab do? But it's not so much from a place of curiosity as it is from skepticism, like skeptical that we can do anything of value, a lot of the time in that case meaning something like arcane or abstract or really innovative, because that's what community labs are supposed to be known for. So, yeah, and you may have experienced this as well, that biohacking is often judged based on how unapproachable and how strange it is, even though the purpose is supposed to be increasing access to science. So we decided to do something that would make a name for BioTown in Ottawa, something we could hang our microscope on, so to say. And we had to figure out what our goals would be for that. So first of all, we wanted it to be scientifically significant, because all the best biohackers around the world are pushing the boundaries rather than recreating or reproducing. They leave reproducibility to the peer reviewers. We also wanted it to be approachable and anchored in reality so that people could look at it and say, okay, I want to do that, or I can do that, or I think that that's useful, and I understand why it's being done. And in the nature of DIY bio, or at least how we see it, we wanted it to be really local, to solve a local problem. And finally, we needed it to have widespread appeal, something that would appeal not just to Ottawans, but to any community that a DIY biospace exists in. So Biotown wanted to address a local problem with near universal appeal that is scientifically significant, but also approachable. We had no idea how to do that. Around the same time, a couple of our founders, John and Carl, met with some officers from the city of Ottawa, and they had a brainstorming session about what kind of problems a biohacker space like us could help them investigate or solve, and they didn't really get anywhere. But then, as the story goes, just as they were getting on the elevator, just as Carl and John were getting on the elevator to leave, one of the officials they were talking to said, well, what about the water problem? Okay. I don't know. What about the water problem? What's more universal than water? What's more closely guarded more loved than the giver of life? And these, I thought, we thought these were pretty promising qualities for any DIY biolab to investigate. Now I'm going to skip the details and just basically focus on the important points, which are that water testing, recreational water testing in Ottawa isn't sufficient, and that's also the case in most municipalities in the U.S. that I know of, because the EPA and Public Health Agency of Canada have very similar standards. But the point is that this issue can serve as a rallying cry for lots of spaces, because you're talking about public health, public safety, environmental sustainability, and the effect that our infrastructure can have on our natural waterways. So Biotown decided to investigate a new water testing protocol that doesn't incubate a sample. We all know it takes time, and instead measures samples based on the amount of DNA using PCR. So we don't really know, and the details, I mean, you can talk to us about that after at some point if you want. We don't really know whether our protocol is going to be accepted by the powers that be. We hope it does. Right now, we're really more focused on affording the research, because we've got access to a ddPCR machine, which we're going to use, and that was luckily we got into contact with a professor at the University of Ottawa for that. But now we need reagents for it. So we launched a crowdfunding campaign a few days ago on the basis that our research into water testing will be significant, local, useful, widespread, and it'll make water testing more accurate, 4 times faster, and also more robust. So there's a poster on the wall out there, and it looks like a postcard from Ottawa. And there's a link at the top and a QR code it links to a secret perk on our Indiegogo campaign just for you guys. And I think that if you want, if everybody here say donated like $3, we'd be so much closer to our goal of $5,000, even though we expect our research to actually take 10. So I guess we'll figure that out when we get there. We're going to publish all of our results. So if any biohacker spaces want, they can try to implement our protocol in their city. And you can be sure that you will own part of it and that we'll reciprocate the favor at any time, because we're really all going for the same thing here. And if you have any questions, yeah, we're happy to talk about the details of our investigation, what our protocol hopes to solve and achieve, and how we're going to overcome some actual significant scientific barriers to it. I just really think that something like this can be a really strong rallying cry for all of our groups to, well, not all, obviously, but, just for a few groups to try to gain interest and tap into existing community organization networks in their own regions. So thank you.
Thank you. There was just that article that came out about plastics in our water. So I'm very curious if Reese, if you're going to be testing for plastics, I'm very curious about that. Okay, so next we have Wakanene Kamau, who is a community-oriented biologist at Seattle's biohackerspace Sound Bio, and he's going to talk about citizen salmon.
Hi. Hey. Thanks. So I'm Wakanene. I'm from Seattle's biohackerspace, Sound Bio, and wanted to talk to you a little bit about our main community project, which is called Citizen Salmon. One of our focus is, so one of the things that got us really interested in salmon is because we live here, and this is a map of the current spawning distributions of salmon. We wanted to focus on a project that allowed us to engage directly with the community that we are living in. So being here, a lot of the salmon that we get comes from Alaska. And fun facts about salmon are that they're both androgynous and semiparous, which means that they migrate up from rivers from the sea to spawn, die after spawning once, and follow a migration pattern throughout their life cycle. So this really links the geographic location that the salmon comes from with where they go. And as a result, there have been groups that have been able to tie these geographic relationships to genetic differences between different populations of salmon. So that's what a group did that created this nice map of different drainage basins in Alaska. And they were able to identify different populations of Chinook salmon that lived in these different drainage basins. And from that, they were able to create these genetic markers that allowed someone, if they were interested, to figure out where their salmon came from, down to the level of, did it come from, say, here, or say here, or say here and there. So one of our members in 2015 saw this paper and got really excited, because it meant that not only could someone working in a lab come up with these different relationships, it's likely that there'd be a way for someone generally who wanted to know where the salmon they had at the dinner was coming from. And that's where our project kind of got its start. Would we be able to recapitulate the data and the results that this group did, taking what they did, what they used to discover these genetic relationships between where the salmon comes from, and could someone take the salmon they had at dinner and figure out where it came from? So we got down to work, and here's some nice photos of us at work. A lot of this happened before we had a physical space. So we were working out of garage labs like Zach's, which is one of our founders. He's over there. And we also had partnerships with different people who are already in the scientific community who opened up their labs to allow us to work. So this is at a educational lab at Fred Hutch Cancer Facility in Seattle. So as we were working on this project, we realized that while we were interested in really figuring out, could we figure out where the salmon came from, what a lot of people in our community needed, or people who were interested in the same questions that we were, they needed to know, how do you begin to do genetic work? How do you begin to use wet lab techniques? So a lot of our time was spent getting people up to speed on what these techniques look like and how they might be able to implement them themselves. So we also had fun while doing it. This is one of our members, Mike, and we made him this nice Chinook outfit that he likes to wear sometimes. And it's, the point being here, like, we like to have fun as well as learn some fun facts about science. So as we're learning about techniques that we're teaching other people, we're also trying to leverage the interest that other folks have on learning new techniques as they come up. So one of our members was interested in microfluidics, and we were able to come up with a way to begin to think about how microfluidics could be used to do these sorts of genetic tests. There's this technique where it's called loop-mediated isothermal amplification, and you make a lot of copies of something, of a gene or region of interest, and you make so many copies that you're able to physically see it precipitate when you've amplified the thing that you're amplifying. So it's really good for vector-related studies like malaria, where you want to see whether or not malaria has, or mosquito has the malaria virus. Also, if there's a unique region of DNA in a particular species or subgroup of salmon, maybe we could use this to figure out whether or not it belongs in this particular group. So it's a lot of fun. A lot of these techniques are new to us as we learn them, and there's a lot of troubleshooting that we have to do as we figure them out. So as we work on them, we try to do as best we can to document our work. This is our blog, where we have a little bit of information, cookbook style, about what we did and why we did it, with some nice illustrated photos so people have an idea of what we're doing. So we're having a great time learning some fun facts about genetics and some fun facts about salmon. And then some news broke that a big farm fishing facility holding 300,000 Atlantic salmon had a structural integrity problem with the net, and more than 160,000 salmon were released into Washington waters. This is salmon that's native to the Atlantic Ocean. So we had this problem where we had an original goal of our project, which is to link this particular species of specific salmon to where it comes from. And we have this thing that just happened where we have a lot of Atlantic salmon in Pacific watersheds. And this is what people are interested in. They see this in the news and they want to know, well, how do you tell these two salmon apart? How would someone tell? So there are physical differences between Atlantic salmon. Here are two ocean phase adults, and Chinook salmon, which is what we were really interested in. But not only are there physical differences, there are also genetic differences. So now our efforts are sort of orienting themselves to the needs of our community and figuring out how we can come up with an easy genetic test for someone to see whether they have Atlantic salmon or Pacific salmon. So if you're interested in being a part of this project, we have a GitHub where we have a large repository of kind of the bioinformatics work that we're doing. You can see what we're doing, help out if you can. And if you live in the Atlantic salmon migration route, it'd be really cool to get some samples from you. It'd also be cool if you are in the Pacific salmon migration route, getting in touch to see if there's a way that we could collect samples or work on this project collaboratively. Yeah, so if you want to contact us, we have a website for this project. We have a Slack channel. You can email me. There's a nice write-up in Biocoder about us. If you want to learn some more, just talk to us. And here's the group. Great, thanks.
Hi. Okay, I love that project because it's what I was talking about is that you are really learning where your food comes from. And now we have our last speaker, Dana Eversart, who is trained as a molecular biologist and a recent graduate from NYU's Interactive Telecommunications program, where she was introduced to the biomaker movement. And alongside her colleagues, she participated in the Biodesign Challenge this year, where they won the Food and Agriculture Prize. Here you go.
Hi. Oh, where's the clicker? This guy? Okay. Let's see if I can get this to work. I promise to be brief, but my name is Dana. Thanks for having me. You guys are all a very inspiring bunch. I just wanted to talk briefly about our project, Ecosystem, which, as was mentioned, was part of the Biodesign Challenge this year. So I have two collaborators who are not here, Chester, who is actually an architect, and Jenny, who is a filmmaker, but really should be an economist. Okay, so Ecosystem is about uniting two different systems, bees and beer. So part of those systems, with respect to bees, is this thing called the Varroa mite, and otherwise known as the Varroa destroyer. And this is part of the reason, if not most of the reason, for a phenomenon known as colony collapse disorder, which I bet many of you are familiar with, the spontaneous abandonment of the hive. And what they do is they get on the bees, they kill the bees, or actually they cause the bees to leave the colony. The hops flower, which I'm sure many of you are also familiar with, flavors beer, gives it that delicious hoppy flavor. Interestingly enough, there is a chemical from the hops flower which actually kills varroa mites. So just to kind of iterate again on why bees are threatened. So there's many stats out there, and many have read about this, but there's a huge loss of bee colonies can't be attributed to just seasonal changes. Hops, on the other hand, which I think less people are familiar with, are actually also a threatened food system. So they have a really specific growing region in the Pacific Northwest. They're also, in some pursuits of research, I've gone to some kind of microbrewery events, and it was talking to some of the brewers there, and something I didn't know, and that's not on these slides, was that it's also political. So Budweiser just bought like a huge plot of land in South Africa, which also accounts for a large portion of all of the hops sold to breweries. So now all these microbreweries can't access those hop supplies. Just another interesting fact that I was not aware of. But they have been driven up in price by 250% over the past decade, and that's a lot of just from one, climate change, and two, demand. So hops are also really environmentally unfriendly, like the processing of them is very environmentally unfriendly. So you're drying them, you're essentially steeping the beer in them, and then they're thrown away. So what connects these two? Yeast. So we are in the process of creating a genetically modified strain of brewer's yeast that biochemically synthesizes hop beta acids. This is actually, there's precedent for this. There's a lab in China who did this, but they did it for the purposes of studying the biochemical pathways of the hop flower. But we want to obviously use it for our own purposes, so we do have to go in and kind of modify it for several reasons. So the idea is that this beta bitter acid can be taken from the glands of, or synthesized in yeast, and then also be biosynthesized for the purposes of killing the mites. So how does this all work together? So hops acids flavor and preserve the beer, and from that is extracted the beta acids. Then those acids are used to flavor the beer. And these acids are also used to protect bees from the varroa mites. So how can we acquire hops acids without the hops flowers? Through yeast. So in the process of fermenting the beer, they're also biochemically synthesizing these beta acids. Come on, there we go. Synthesizes these hop beta acids, and then from there, we want to use it to flavor and preserve beer, and then also protect the bees from the varroa mites. These would also obviously be separate processes. The other thing we wanted to do to kind of close the system is to use some of the honey from the bees in order to flavor the beer. So that's kind of our little ecosystem as it stands. This is another aside. Pollen is also a supplement for the bees, as is actually in our research we were finding that yeast, beekeepers actually use yeast cakes to feed bees as a supplement. So that's what that is showing. So much. I'll skip through this. This is very oversimplified science that nobody needs to see here. Because what I want to get to is just to show you how this one little genetically modified organism actually ended up in us reaching out to so many different facets that we never thought we would. So one was we were using GenSpace to do some of the actual bioengineering. We were using Jenny's bathtub in Manhattan to brew our own yeast, or beer, which we actually served at the Biodesign Challenge. It's not genetically modified, but it was our own home brew. It was actually pretty good. This is a beautiful picture of that beer in Manhattan. We also, Chester built a hive. It's a modified Langstroth hive, which is out there for you to see. And it has these gates where we would put the beta acids so that it can topically be applied to the bees, which is the current standard protocol. this is also an aside that wasn't mentioned before, but he's really interested in just hive structure in general. Like, how can we build hives for bees that is sustainable for the bees rather than for the purposes of farming honey? So he's doing a lot of research into like 3D printers, how to make kind of mimic wild hives, how to use different materials like potentially fungus to grow those hives. So that's a whole other aspect of this that he's incredibly interested in. And then we had bees. This is Chester's roof in Brooklyn, where our bees were living. So I think they're now dormant or are in the process of becoming. So this is our ecosystem or beecosystem as it exists as a whole. And the whole point of this is that what was really interesting for me, coming from a science background where I was using molecular biology techniques for very one-directional purpose, was how this could really be expanded upon to create, to connect systems that wouldn't have either in nature existed, and how you can use those to create sustainable economies. For instance, what if this beer was like a front-facing product for actually being able to fund maybe this research about feral hives, about how to prevent colony collapse disorder. And this all stemmed, like I said, from one kind of GMO. And that also is another reason why I really like this project, is because it's been a really interesting sounding board for having conversations about GMOs for people who wouldn't typically, well, who don't really know that much about it, and there's a ton of misinformation. And so I'm really interested in kind of like having these conversation starters around beer, which is the conversation starter, and let's talk about what this is and what it means. And so, yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right, that was the end of this very amazing session. I'm going to pass you over to David.
Can we thank Adeline one more time for being such a wonderful host? Yeah. Okay, so just some logistics. Again, because we're running late, we're still going to go ahead with the next very, I think, part of the program that I think everybody's very excited about, which is our panel on how to start a community lab. But after that panel is over, we have the breakout sessions and then a coffee break. My proposal is that after this panel finishes, we do our breakout session and you get your coffee while you do the breakout, and we still try to come back at 4 o'clock for learning and education. Okay, so we'll try to roll with that. And basically, this panel, I'm so excited for it. This is actually, I think, going to be kind of a historic moment to have this panel and this group here up on stage talking about their experiences starting labs. And I'm going to introduce the moderator for this session, Patrick from Countercultural Labs, BioCurious, and General Awesomeness. Make some noise for Patrick, everybody.
Hi, everyone. All right, let's start filling these chairs here. And maybe if we move them closer to the front so we're not like hidden behind the pedestal here. How about we move these chairs up to the front so people can actually see us? All right. Excellent. And one more chair for me. Huh? I'll take a chair as well. Yeah. All right. So I figured there's going to be a bunch of people here that have started community labs, have started community groups. And a bunch of people that are in the process of doing so or would love to do so. So I figure what better occasion to get some of the people that have some experience doing so together. All right. And so I asked the panel members to start out. Since we have a lot of people on stage and we don't have that big of a slot, I asked the panel members to start out with a very brief introduction, sort of what their lab is, how did your group get started, and what's the single best piece of advice you can give to new folks wanting to start a group? So.
Okay.
And so introduce who you are and what's your relationship to your group.
Yeah.
And right.
Yeah. I'm Bhavna Pandya. I'm leading BioRiddle. It's a DIY bio lab and bio incubator in India. So 3 years back, this lab started, and I started with a top-to-bottom approach. First I made a mistake. I went to people. I told them about the concept. So this DIY concept is very, very, very new to India. and spreading this culture somewhere where people don't even know this culture exists. It takes a lot. So then I went to one of the very well-known scientists in India. His name is Padma Shri Dr. R.V. Hosur. So Padma Shri is the third largest position given to the scientist who has contributed a lot in the field of science. So he was one of them, and I went to him. I told him about the concept that I'm thinking to start on. So he was the first person. He came up, and he really got excited about this idea. And that's how he connected me to other scientists. And they helped me with creating the panels, guidelines, how to approach people, how to approach community. So that helped me a lot. I mean, going with a known person, connecting with all the other scientists around, and then spreading this word. So that way we got started, and then initially we used their labs as well, because we did not have our own space. We had a space, but without equipment. So we used their labs. We sent out our students to their labs to use something. We made our own instrument, of course. We made centrifuge, the first instrument of our biolab. And then it was not working out, so we sent out our students to their labs. They started working on the projects, and slowly we started gathering all the instruments from the institutes that they were supposed to discard. So we gathered all the instruments, and then we got it repaired, and we started using it. So that's how we started the lab with the community. And now, currently, we have 35 students, 13 projects. And after creating projects, we realized these projects are very potential, and it should go to the end users for whom these projects have made. So we started BioIncubator a year back, and the DIY biologists that we had, they turned into startups now. So we have 5 startups right now in our BioRiddle. So that's it.
Well, thank you. Heather? I'm actually going to start a timer if I could do it the first time around. Yes, go for it.
Hold on, don't start it yet.
Too late.
Hello? This is 7? Okay.
Great. So hi, my name's Heather Underwood, and I am one of the co-founders of Denver Biolabs in Colorado. We got started as a meetup group online, so meetup.com, and it was really sort of sudden, which goes to my piece of advice. Oh, okay. And so I was a professor at the University of Colorado in Denver, teaching human-centered design, innovation, and prototyping, and had been interested in the DIY biospace for quite some time, had actually gone to BioCurious and Counterculture Labs, and hadn't been to GenSpace yet, but we'll get there. And I was like, why isn't bio incorporated into human-centered design, innovation, and prototyping? So I actually started Denver Biolabs at CU Denver as a community group, but in the academy, which provided some nice benefits for a while. And then, as I mentioned in my Hello World slide, we actually just moved out into our own warehouse space like a month ago. And so now we're kind of joining the real community biolabs because we wanted to provide more access. We were really trying to figure out how to grow our community, and being in the university was really limiting that for us. So I actually also quit my job at the university. Yeah, I think that's it. I was pretty excited about it. I just found that things moved really slow there, and I was kind of ready for something a little more fast-paced. Oh, my best advice. So 2 things, just do it. I know I sound like Nike, but just go for it. I think a lot of times we're really held back by fear, and it took 2 minutes to set up the meetup group. And then we had like 15 people come to our first thing. And one more piece of advice is trust your communities. Every time that I've been kind of lost on where to go, you just look to your community and you really trust them, what they want, and where they want to take it, and they'll help you out.
Okay, so in 2008, I was sitting at my desk working in a biotech job, directing a group looking at biomarkers of tobacco-related harm, and I saw this column in the News of the Weird area of my newspaper about these guys who were making glowing green yogurt and had labs in their closet, calling themselves DIY Bio. So I started lurking on the DIY Bio Google group. And so really the origins of the first lab I founded, which was GenSpace, was I typed in, does anyone want to start DIY Bio NYC? And 3 people showed up. 1 was a reporter who smelled a story, and 2 were students that couldn't find any place to do work that they wanted to do. And I felt so bad for these 2 like brilliant young kids that we started meeting, and we picked up speed. We got more and more people, but since no one had ever done this before, it was really, we were just kind of feeling around in the dark. One of the kids, his dad was a lawyer, so he incorporated us, and he wrote all the documents. So we didn't have a business plan, we didn't have anything. So in terms of advice on how to structure a lab, I'm probably the last person to ask. But in terms of building something gradually, I would say that the most important thing is the community and the people and getting that community involved. It's less important than the space, it's less important than anything else. And probably my biggest bit of advice is 2 of them. First, be very careful how you structure the hierarchy of who has the power in your organization, because it can come back to haunt you. Be careful about who you put on your board and stuff like that if you don't have the sort of arrangement you have at where everyone's on the board. And then the last piece is a piece that Drew Endy gave me, and he said, don't be afraid to walk away and start something new, because we can always use another DIY biolab.
Hi, my name's Tom, and I'm from the Baltimore Underground Science Base. We hit our Hello World this morning. We got started actually out of an iGEM team. My day job is I teach at a community college, and I had some students that wanted to form an iGEM team in 2010, and we had trouble recruiting enough students to really form a good team, so I suggested they reach out to the DIY community, and we got this massive response of people that were electricians and engineers and lawyers and all interested in biology and wanting to participate in this team. So we had the first DIY GEM team, is what they called it, in 2010. And so that really, opened my eyes that there was a need for places like this, and I actually thought at first that we could do it within the school, which turned out not to be true. So they were, dead set against doing that. They have their model, and they weren't going to go against it. So it really became apparent that the only way that we could proceed was to open up a space of our own. So we did that in 2012. I've been going 5 years now. As far as piece of advice, one thing I would say is that starting is the easy part. Okay, you have a lot of energy, you got a lot of people involved, but it is not a sprint, it is a marathon. And you got to keep that in mind. Actually, I'll throw out a couple of other pieces of advice. You do need to think about how you're structuring the organization. We did a lot of work early on before we put our lab benches together and stuff like that, building the board and the bylaws and really kind of laying down sort of this foundation. And I think that's helped us along the way, avoiding some of the pitfalls. I guess that's, it's a marathon, and put some work early on into thinking, into thinking about your foundational documents and structure.
Hi everyone, my name is Thomas, and I started as a synthetic biologist. I was really an academic, and so, however, I had this high frustration in me because I participated in iGEM in 2007 before doing my PhD, and I somehow always wanted to go back to this feeling of freedom and interdisciplinarity. And so when I heard of DIY Bio, it resonated with this idea I had in my head. And so I couldn't find a way to implement this in my own lab. So I said, let's just start a new lab. And so I did that thanks because I was, I knew the campus where I was working. So I went to see the head of the campus. That, I know that you have this, basement full of, lost equipment. Can I just go there and take some of them? No, you're never going to use it anyway. Said, yes, yeah, do it. And so I used my car, and it was kind of small. So I packed it as much as I can with all the equipment I could find that would be useful. And then I went and built the first version with people I would find on the road of the first version of LabPayas. And so that started in the basement of an abandoned building within an existing hackerspace called TMP Lab. And TMP Lab, the community of TMP Lab really was the one that convinced me that this was possible. I didn't know the hacker world before. And like the kind of value they were driving, provoked me in a way that I thought that those values should be actually represented also in academia, like kind of transparency, sharing, citizen counter power. And so you guys, I just want to do what you're doing, but for biology. And so they really helped us, amazingly. They welcomed us. They gave us actually 15 square meters of space. And we built the lab. And the thing that's also surprised me is I would say 90% of all the people that came, as members, were non-biologists. I was not expecting this. So that's when I understood that this movement and this approach has so much potential because it could reach actually people that you will never meet otherwise. So my best piece of advice, because LabPayas for 3 years has been a squat lab. And we did great work together, and people had certain kind of freedom. But somehow we had this ambition of doing like ambitious project because to prove the worth of this movement. So that was really important, like to set like the quality threshold high. And so that's what the first thing. Like, don't be afraid of being ambitious. And actually, we have this responsibility as pioneers, to show that this kind of new way of organizing work is worth it. People are looking to us. And the other thing is, when we moved, we completely transformed the model of LabPayas. When we moved to Paris, the idea was to not be a squad lab anymore, where there is no business model, but actually to build one where we can start paying people, having a full-time team, paying a rent. And we moved to 800 square meters space, so that's 8,000 square feet. That's huge, right, in the center of Paris. So how do you go from being a squat lab with no business model to a lab where you have a €500,000 budget, annual budget? And that's basically where you have to become an entrepreneur. So that at some point you need to choose a model and accept it and dig in it. You won't be able to do everything, and if you want to focus on education, if you want to focus on acceleration, on incubation, at some point you need to be good at something, and you need to choose, and some part of your community will leave because they will not agree, but at some point that's something you need to be aware that you need to, be focused on one single thing. That's the best advice I can give, like just be focused, yeah.
Super. Thank you. Well, I am Beno Juarez from Peru. I found the first Fab Lab in Peru and in Latin America. It was 7 years ago. Today we are more than 100 Fab Labs just in Latin America. In the world we are more than 1,000. In all this experience, I think one of the most important skill is not technological skill. It's not about lab. It's not about machines. In my experience, it's more about emotions. No? How do you manage emotions? And if you want to build a community, I think it's important to really include everybody, even people that don't want to be. People that exclude. No? It is not easy. It's super hard. But when you do that, you start to create a community. I think this is one of the biggest experience I have. Another, it's be like a monster fish. In the Amazon, we call the paiche. It's mean these monster fish have lungs and also have the gills. No? You will need extra oxygen when you are making a community or whatever dream that you have, no? Because in the way, I mean, it's like becoming a pioneer. You are making a way where it's not, no? It's easy to follow ways that exist, but when you start a community like that, no, you will have to make everything. So it's easy in the way to say, well, I don't want to continue with that, etc. No? So this extra oxygen, it's extremely important in your life. And the other, well, in my experience, the other thing is give the power. No? We are not here to take power of people. We are not here to, I mean, we are here to empower people to make their own dreams real and share these dreams and grow together. This is extremely important. Our network is based in that. We are more than 700 people around Fab Lab in Latin America. And everybody that want to make a project and that want to lead any group for education, for, I don't know, artisans, etc., they can do it, and they can join efforts in these common dreams.
So I figured I'd give a brief intro on what happened with Counterculture Labs as well when we started up. And I'll time myself, damn it. There we go. So a lot of us that started out Counterculture Labs actually had a connection with BioCurious initially. We had a bunch of people from the East Bay, San Francisco East Bay, Oakland, and thereabouts, going over to BioCurious an hour away and coming back. And BioCurious at the time was going through a lot of strife between the members and some of the people on the board. So we took some of the good examples of what BioCurious did and some of the bad examples that we wanted to avoid and sort of structured Counterculture Labs accordingly. So we actually made sure to have a very flat hierarchy where the members had a lot of power. So we legally are a nonprofit with voting members. So it means that we have like yearly elections for all the officers and things like that. Some of the good things that I think BioCurious did was, and a lot of the other labs that you've heard did, was start with the community. Build a community first and worry about building a lab later. Meetup turned out to be a really useful tool if you just want to have like a software tool to get you started, to just start scheduling events and get all the sort of birds of a feather together, all the like-minded people that are interested in these weird topics. Just start having get-togethers at people's houses. You can do little field trips, things like that. There's so many things you can do without actually having a lab yet. Let's see. We did a Kickstarter fundraiser. We raised $33,000 on Kickstarter. And we were still living off of that until like the start of this year where we did some major infrastructure upgrades. So that kind of money can go a long way if you don't pay any salaries. Best pieces of advice, actually, I'm glad to say that they've already been covered. Be in it for the long haul. Don't sit back, make it happen, and build the community first, are the ones that I've written down. So, so I would like to open this up to questions to the audience. Let me insert one more question of my own. You guys all think of your own questions. I just want to, whoever wants to answer this one. How many people does it need to get started? Anybody want to take that one? We have just one.
Okay, since I'm at least 3, I would say.
Yeah, we started with 3 kind of core members, and then a few, we did like focus groups and gathered a community first, but there are 3, hardcore ones.
I would agree with that, but then we also, it was like, well, how many people do we need to pay the rent in this space if everyone pays $100 a month? So that was kind of a thing too.
Yeah. As Tom said, getting it started is the easy part.
Yeah, we just started with 2. Like you said, it doesn't take very many people to make a meetup group and organize an event, so we had 2.
Yeah, that seems to be the most common answer, is sort of 2 or 3. You need to get some kind of critical mass. So if you have a bad month, it doesn't just die in its infancy, right?
So I think I've started all alone. But yes, when you have a community, you are not alone. You have people who will do something for the community. So I started with building community, and then I got many hands to start on.
All right. Let's get some questions from the audience. Any questions out there? And I don't know if we can probably pass around some of the mics. Okay. I see a question over there.
Hi. Is it on?
Yeah.
I'm Maria from Hong Kong. Well, because my lab right now, I have the same story like, I start the DIY Bio group on Meetup, and then we have 2 people at the beginning, and then slowly add up to 3. But then we still sometimes find difficulties in organizing community activities every week or regularly. It's sometimes like we are run out of ideas of how to engaging more new members and new community members to join. And I would like to ask, how do you guys figure this out and keep the things ongoing?
Yeah, I think that is exactly what I was getting at with my piece of advice of like trust the community and really ask them what they want. We've gone through a lot of different phases, everything from like a lot of guest speakers in the early stages to more like classes where we're actually teaching biology at a really foundational level, to doing iGEM, like more project-based, and that was really driven by the community. We were just really good at listening to what they wanted and finding new ways to engage, but they suggested them.
I think the classes for us were the key thing to start building a community, because a lot of people were intimidated by the idea of biology, and they didn't even know what kind of project to even start thinking about until they came in and took some introductory classes. And also the group project thing I think is really good. Like we did the Barcoding Alaska and Gowanus Canal and things like that. And we would do them on an open night and then get people involved that way. But I think it's also important that if you open a space, you're going to end up having to have somebody in the space engaging with the community. You can't just have a space that people walk in and out of. I mean, I don't think for us, it was, especially when we opened, there was all of this, it was early, and so there was also that, you know, is this a safe space? And we said, well, yeah, there's somebody there all the time, you know. And I think it ended up at BioCurious too, that there were some people that ended up spending an inordinate amount of time managing and helping people with projects that didn't know science. And that's really good for a community, but you have to be really careful you don't burn those people out. That they, you know, you don't have the money in the beginning to compensate them. They're doing it for free, for the love of it, and sometimes they can get taken advantage of. So it helps to have a point person that will do that and help people develop an idea. Like someone comes in and says, I want to make a glowing green mushroom to put on my album cover or something. You know what I mean, right?
All right.
Yeah, so having cheap classes got a lot of people involved. Actually, I think Ryan Hoover came because we had a $25 synthetic biology class that we organized, and so he's been with us ever since. I think he was our second member, and now on the board. So so that really started growing the community. We started some projects really not knowing what we were getting into, and so people like the bioprinting project kind of got started where we just built out of a kit a printer, and that's really that project is going on till now. So there were those couple of lucky things. We also went out to a number of community events, and we developed a couple of really simple things. It still amazes me today how excited people get when you show them how to isolate DNA from strawberries. So we go out to libraries and, started doing things like that, and it's, people are just amazed by this, very simple things. So there's lots of little things you can do to kind of get people interested and engaged outside the community and use that to kind of build up your community.
All right, great, thanks. Let's get some more questions from the audience, maybe. Or
I just wanted to add up something. I think it's, at least in my perspective, it's been very important that don't hesitate to, once you've visited several models, like certain kind of workshops, they're working, like to dig again inside and like to create a model where you can actually create something sustainable, and even diversify that model at some point. It's like, for example, for GeneSpace, it's been classes, definitely. It's been like the backbone of, I would say, of the community lab for so many years. For us, it's been workshops also, but more outside. At the very beginning of La Paillasse, we focused at the very first time on DNA barcoding, and people just loved it. So we did it in many places, and people actually loved, as you said, just to manipulate and see DNA. The new model nowadays is completely different of La Paillasse. Because we explored different ones, and the current one is basically more incubator-based, where we select people, and they come for free, and they can use La Paillasse as they want. And in exchange, they give 5 days a month of their time, and we create projects between all the members that are residents inside La Paillasse. And themselves, they work with partners, and the partners actually pay La Paillasse to make the space run. That's basically how 90% of the revenues and incomes of La Paillasse are made.
Go. All right. Got some more questions. Sure.
Hi. Thanks. This might sound more of a request rather than a question, but in the best case scenario, you sometimes get people involved from academia or even the government. But in the worst case scenario, they're not even aware of the movement exists. And for example, in Mexico, maybe. So I would like to request from you, like, maybe your support in order to let them know, the authorities and the community and the academia, sometimes, that what is happening around the world. And it would be just great in the sense of community to have your backup and yeah, just to open the channels that we can request both your assistance, your experience, and yeah, I mean, so that you allow us to talk about what you've done, and also, I don't know, maybe an email from you supporting us.
Yeah, we've actually been having conversations on whether we should have like sister labs in other countries, that we can focus on a specific community that we can share tools with, and maybe get some funding for travel back and forth. All of that would be interesting ways of arranging that. There's a couple of unconference sessions coming up on global collaboration. I know there's one all the way at the end of the day on Sunday. So yeah, keep an eye on that. Any other suggestions?
Also, a good way to link up with academic institutions is if you have members that are students and they can convince their professor to come and give a talk, and then maybe kind of say, well, what about a workshop? Could you do a hands-on workshop? Well, all right, what about a class? Could you teach a class? And sort of ease them into and get them excited about the community. And then you might even end up doing a collaborative project with them.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that, we've actually found that there's a lot of need and want in the academic community from postdocs and graduate students that are now being encouraged to communicate with the general public. So, we're seen as a resource by those academic communities. And so if you can pitch yourself as a resource, that you're really the facilitator to reach out into the general public, because a lot of times the academic communities don't have that capacity or know-how.
Yeah, here in the US, the National Science Foundation, anytime you get a grant from them, you're required to have an outreach component. So that gives you a way in with these academics and saying, look, we can be your outreach component. All right, other questions from the public?
Actually, it's a couple things. So the first thing, following on from what you were saying,
One of the things that I think would be a cool idea would be if some of the luminaries of the DIY bio movement actually went to some of these things, because I know when Ellen came to Vancouver to Open Science Network, you know, that was a big draw. And likewise, when we had Andrew Pelling from Senior TED Fellow come, you know, things like that, it helps to attract people. And if people are coming to Vancouver, you know, certainly come there. And likewise to any other city that has a DIY bio, you know, I think it helps. But the other thing that I really wanted to talk about was kind of sustainability. You know, Open Science Network is 2 years, 3 months old, and I've gone through the wave of, you know, really outward-facing, trying to get people to come in, running workshops, giving talks, you know, organizing other people to do that, and then you get kind of burnt out. And so I went through the inward-facing because I started to lose members. And you know, Vancouver's a very expensive city to actually set up and operate something like that, just the rent. And you know, it was for a volunteer is just struggling to get things going. And how do we build up? How do we, once people come in, how do you convert them from just visiting, licking us, to actually coming and playing?
Yeah, super. It's an extremely important question. In our experience, we have 3 programs. The first is the volunteers program, based in knowledge, knowledge that we share with people, and then with some challenge that we want from them. But I agree, this will die super fast. No, maybe no more than 2 months, the people start to leave. No, so after this, we create a FAB coin. No, it's a recognition about the values of the support that people give to the lab, and they are winning some coins, FAB coins in this case, and then they can change that because with services, or with use the lab, with the machines. Also, for example, with, in our case, 25% of the How to Grow has been financed through FAB coins. No? So people is very excited about that, are supporting many different areas. And everything is involved in a platform with a gamification system. So I think it's, these are some best practices that could work for that.
And in terms of sort of like burnout and losing critical mass, this is a common pattern. I mean, if you look at the Hackerspace patterns document, it's like pretty much every hackerspace, whether it's bio or other, goes through this slump around the 2-year mark. That's when the initial founders sort of get tired of it. And so the solution is to expect that there's these phases that pretty much any project goes through. Individual research projects or community projects or whatever will go through those phases as well. And just know that that's going to happen, and make sure that you continuously renew your organization. I mean, if you haven't brought any new blood in for a couple of months, then you should probably be looking at that. I mean, what is the next generation of leaders that is going to take this organization forward for the next, like, 2 or 3 years? Right? So,
one thing that we've used at Bugs.
I think it was.
Having talks. Okay, so we don't make any money from talks. They're just, you know, free and open to the public. But it really serves as an entry point where people come in and they say, "Wow, what's going on here?" From, you know, all different walks of life. So we get you know, academics who come in to hear some of these talks, and we get the general public who comes in to, and so then they get curious and they take a class, and you know, and then we try and get them to be members, and so.
I don't know. I would just add that some communities may not be able to support these labs. I always say to start with Meetup and see if you can get a group going, because there was one case where a GenSpace member got really excited about starting a group in White Plains, and I said, well, before you start buying things and committing, why don't you see? And he couldn't get anyone, he couldn't find a critical mass. So they will go up and they will go down. But if you're in a big city like Vancouver, it's really the luck of the draw. And the more people you get in for the free events, the more likely you're going to find that next person that just gets the bug and starts working on a really cool project. Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks. So my question is about sustainability and ecological sustainability. So I've noticed like researchers, they don't really think about all the pipette tips and stuff like that they're wasting. So I was wondering what you're doing to address this problem, because obviously this also goes hand in hand with costs.
It's inherently a not very eco-friendly business, because if you want things to be clean, you either have to go disposable or you have to do things like, I mean, we used to wash pipettes in chromic acid, which isn't terribly ecologically friendly either. So, I mean...
Yeah. Okay. Regarding sustainability, initially when you want to build a community, I think this sustainability goes out, because all you want is to build a community. And for sustaining the activities that you do for the community building, you can, we have approached people around us. Like I said, I went to the scientists, then these scientists are really helpful. The scientists which are there in the research institutes, they want to help out people, but it's just we don't reach out to them. So what I did is I reached out to some scientists. They helped me with the resources, and you know, they are the promoters of us. One known scientist, he is impressed with us. He'll meet 10,000 scientists more. He will tell them about us, and that's how he'll spread the word about us. And many of them, they want to contribute towards the society in this DIY bioculture. So we went to them. They give some resources to drive these activities, and then we asked companies so that they can give us. In India, we have this corporate social responsibility thing, where they have to give out 2% of their profit to such activities, to such initiatives. So we identified few companies like that, and then we got them on board, and they helped us in driving these activities. With we didn't charge anything to our members, to the community builders, no one. So we are still not charging them. We just want to build the community. We are driving our activities, conducting workshops, having talks. Even some of the scientists, they turned up doing the DIY activities at our space. So it was very inspiring for the students who look up for him. So.
Thank you. I think we're getting close to the end of our time slot. Okay. Would people like to have an unconference session on this topic, where you can have more sort of one-on-one discussion on what works and hands up? Yeah, definitely. All right. We'll arrange it. It's not on the schedule yet, but we'll put one on there. We'll find an open slot. Lastly, if there's other groups out here that actually have a group or are in the process of forming a group, I put the timeline on the wall just opposite of the registration desk. So if you have interesting events from your own timeline that you would like to put on there, feel free to add that to that. So thank you all for coming, and we'll see you again at the unconference session, I guess.
Let's hear it one more time for our panel. Yes. Okay. That was actually really, really amazing. I personally was looking forward to that this entire conference. So very excited that we were able to get that illustrious group together. And now, again, what we're going to do to make up our time is we're going to do our breakout session now. This is a session, again, a breakout still on sustainability for organizations and labs. And so we're going to skip the coffee. We're going to have the coffee break while we do the breakout, okay? So you can go get your coffee and so on. And we're going to try to start the education session still promptly at 4. So for the remaining time for the breakout, we have 3 breakouts. So if you're a leader in a breakout session, you want to come on stage right now, and you can explain very quickly what your breakout is. So if you're leading a breakout session, come on stage. And again, this is extremely important from a documentation perspective, okay? I shared with you all by email earlier a Google folder that has the different sessions for each day. And so you're going to, again, make sure you create a Google document, assign a note taker and a report back person so that the notes can be recorded. I think we did a reasonably good job in the biodesign session, so I think that went pretty well. Okay, you want to just explain for just 15 seconds what your breakout is?
Hi guys, I'm Elliot, and with Matt and a couple of other people, we are working on trying to get biohackers paid. So if you work your ass off, which I know all of you do, it's only fair that you get paid in some kind of way. So we're gonna illuminate the different career paths of biohackers, figure out the different funding sources, and do it all together in this strategy session. So thank you so much. We'll be in the theater over there.
Kia ora. We're going to be talking about managing the cross-cultural things of DIY Bio, Fab Lab, and Maker Culture, and probably some of the other cultures in there as well. I run a DIY Bio Lab and a Fab Lab, so it'd be great to talk about that. Yeah.
Choose your bacteria.
I'm going to go for pink.
Okay.
Thank you.
You go wherever you want to go, wherever your group wants to lead. Okay, Dan, come on.
Hi, Dan Gershkin, Winnie Poncelet, is that how you pronounce it? Winnie and myself will be talking about the community financial sustainability. So how to make the space or the organization that you're trying to run financially sustainable. All right.
Okay, everyone, have an awesome session, a breakout session, 45 minutes, come back at 4 o'clock. And to all the session leaders, make sure they take notes. Very important. Thank you all so much. See you at 4.
Hey, Harry, how are you? Hold on, let me see if I can hear you. Let me get Tech DI up. Yeah. Hey. Hold on, I'm not getting you at all. I'm starting to guess that. Let me just double check the computer up there. Tech DI. Hey, Harry, keep talking for a minute, please. Oh, Stage DI, sorry.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I could hear you perfectly.